Hey guys, this is Amber from NotableInk.com. Welcome to Justine Hovey's 50 Cards for 50K YouTube Hop. We're celebrating her achieving a 50,000 subscriber milestone, which is huge. She is so amazing in our community and so encouraging to YouTubers and bloggers, and I just can't appreciate her enough. Over 50 cards are going to be shared along the hop, and Justine is giving away 5 $50 gift cards to your choice of either scrapbook.com or Ellen Hudson. So be sure to follow along. The more videos you watch, the more comments you leave, the more chances you have to win. We are sharing our favorite card making techniques today. I encourage you to check out Justine's Technique Resource Binder class, and I'm going to have that link down below for you. The technique I'm sharing today is my favorite way to layer stamp. So I like to layer stamp for realism. So you can use just one color family or you can mix a couple colors, but I like to look at a photo for reference and try and match those colors to create a realistic bloom. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be using Altenew's Build-A-Flower Sweet Violet set. Violets are great because they're a winter flower, so I thought that would be appropriate. And I'm going to show you the insert so that you have an idea. Here's the layering guide so that you can follow. This set is very easy to layer, and we'll go through some of that. But I also wanted to show you how much information is inside the trifold and show you what these flowers look like when you stamp them with one color family. So 4 different shades of the same color. They're very pretty, but they don't necessarily look as realistic as they could. So I'm going to show you how to get that realistic look. I have another in-depth video with this same technique with the Build-A-Flower Heliobore, so I'll link it up in the right-hand corner there for you. The first thing that I do is look for photo inspiration. I thought this was a really pretty flower. Pansies and violets are a little bit interchangeable in terms of the style of the flower and some of the colors. The purple around the outside and how the yellow and purple at the bottom mix together to create a little bit of a brown color in there really appealed to me. So we're going to use this one. And then I thought this was the coolest flower. I'm a certified Zentangle teacher, so the pattern on here was also really appealing. It was definitely something I felt like I could draw onto the flowers after they were done. These we're not going to create today, but I did want to share this with you. These are brushstroke pansies. I had never heard of these, but these would be beautiful to watercolor. I thought this was just the coolest flower, so I did want to share that with you. So starting with the purple flower, we're going to use Altenew Buttercream. This is a really light creamy yellow, and I'm going to use this on, this is actually layer 2. So I'm going to omit the outline layer of this stamp set and go right for this base layer here, which is the most solid stamp. The reason for that is the outline isn't going to make the flower look very realistic. So that's definitely one I want to eliminate. Then I'm coming in with some Distress Oxide in the color Lemonade. So the top, we'll look at the reference photo again. The top is a really light yellow, and then the bottom is a little bit darker. There's a little more saturation to that yellow. So I'm going to have my photo next to me so that I can keep it for reference as I'm choosing my colors and mixing the colors. So I'm going to stamp multiple of these, but I'm only going to show you one set of each one. Now I have Distress Oxide Wilted Violet and also Blueprint Sketch. So I don't have this on film, but what I ended up doing to get an even better blend with these two colors is I smushed some of the ink onto my glass mat and mixed the two colors together and picked it up from the side for the next set of flowers that I'm going to do. And I felt like that was a better mix of colors. So that's something you might want to consider. So I'm just using a small blending brush to dab on some of this color, and you can see on the petals over on the photo inspiration, that color comes into those creases, into the folds of the flowers. So that's why I'm using this small blending brush versus a sponge dauber to apply the ink, because I want to tease that color into some of those creases to get, again, a more realistic look. The reason I'm mixing Wilted Violet and Blueprint Sketch is because the photo inspiration, that's more of a bluer violet. happening there. So I'm just mixing the two colors. You can see the two flowers at the bottom. I've already added some blue to that, and I'll just show you here. So for the blue, I'm trying to diffuse that color a little bit more. I'm not going in with as much of a solid coating as I did with the purple because I just want to add just a touch of blue. So we'll add that here. And then you're going to see that I'm going to leave these solid stamps at the top of my MISTI in case I need to go back to them. Here's a close-up of that blue and purple. And I kind of wish I had added a little more blue to it, to be honest. So here is the third layer of the stamp set, and this is where we're going to start to get some of our shadows. So when I'm lining up my stamps, I refer to the layering guide that comes with the packaging, and these stamps are easy to line up. I find the easiest place to look at is that white center. So that white center lines up perfectly there, and then for the other stamp, same thing. There's that white center, and the outline of that lines up. If you get that lined up, then you're good to go. Before I ink up that third layer, I'm going to go back to my base layer and add a little bit of wild honey to the center of these flowers, because if you look at the inspiration photo, it's a little darker in that center. So I'm going to go ahead and add that now, and then I'll go to my third layer, which is already loaded up at the top there. So I need to add a little bit more. That wasn't quite enough. So I'll go in a little bit darker with the wild honey. So when I did the heliobores, I mixed dye inks and distress oxides. I did use a dye ink, that Buttercream, in the beginning. So that looks better, that saturation. But for the most part, I'm using oxides. One of the things that I like about oxides for this technique is that they sit on top of each other. They're less transparent. They're a little bit more opaque, and they sit on top of each other so the colors don't blend as much. So you can add lighter colors on top of darker colors if you need to. So here I've inked up that third layer with wild honey. I did a couple layers of that, and I'm just heat setting it because I have quite a bit of ink on the panel so far, and I want to make sure that I keep getting crisp edges. If the paper's really wet, I feel like you could potentially get some fuzzy images instead of that crisp stamping, so that's why I've dried it. I'm going to go back to this third layer, which is that detail stamp, and add just a touch of Seedless Preserves to the center to just get a little bit of a darker center in there. And you can see how nicely those blend together. I really like how it's looking so far. And then I do this. So this is the last detail layer, and I should not have done that in Seedless Preserves. I think wild honey would have been a better bet for that. So that's supposed to be the shadow. So first of all, I misstamped it and didn't have it lined up correctly. Then I used a color that was too dark. So I don't love that part, but we're going with it because I'm not starting over. And this is actually the last detail layer, is the veins that go into the flowers. So I have the veins loaded on, and I'm just putting some Seedless Preserves right in the center of these veins. And then because the rest of the petals are that light yellow, I don't want purple veins through there. So I'm using antique linen on the outside of this, and I'm just blending that right on the stamp. And that's going to have just a hint of the veins without it being overpowering and taking over the flower. Because if you look at the inspiration photo, you don't really see the veins out into the yellow parts. You mostly just see it in the center. And I like how that looks. And then all that's left for stamping is these teeny tiny little stamps that go right in the center. I'm doing these with buttercream, but just stamping it a couple times. And then here it is compared to the inspiration photo. So my purples aren't exactly the same, but I really do like how it turned out, with the exception of those dark shadow areas. So since we're focused on the technique, I'm not going to show how I created the rest of the card, but I die cut everything. I dry embossed an A2 size panel, added some splatter. I'll have all of the products that I use listed below. And then what I did to get even more dimension on these two largest flowers is put the little wobblers on the back of them, because I really wanted them to stand up. I don't necessarily want them to move and wiggle around, But when you look at a bunch of pansies, you don't really see the stems of the flowers. You see kind of the leaves sticking out all behind them, but really what you see is just these blooms kind of coming out at you. And I wanted to try and recreate that. So on the two flowers that are kind of, you see the side view of the flowers, those are on 2 layers of foam tape, and then the 2 larger flowers are on those wobblers. So you can see the first finished card here, and then we will move on to the second card. For the second card, we're doing the Tiger Eye variety of pansy, violet, I'm not sure, it's one or the other. I'll have the sources for the photos in my blog. So for this one, really all of the petals are pretty much the same color yellow, and what adds the greater depth to it is that the lines, the detail lines of the flower are darker on the bottom 3 petals and lighter at the top. So I'm just going to use the same color pretty much all around. I have inked up the stamps with Lemonade Distress Oxide ink, and you know, now that I'm doing the voiceover, I totally could have stamped this in like Altenew Chamomile or Snapdragon and it would have been the exact color. But because I had Distress Oxides out on my desk, I just ended up using Lemonade, Wild Honey Distress Oxide, and mixed the color to get what I wanted. So I did add a little bit of a darker color down at the bottom. And then I am going to darken it up in the middle. So yellow and purple make brown. So that's what I'm going to do here, because I feel like those lines are probably a really dark purple versus a straight up brown. So I'm going to darken the centers. And for this one, the only stamp, no, that's not true. I was going to say the only stamp that I used was this base stamp, but that's not true. I think I'm adding a little bit of frayed burlap to the center there just to darken it up even more. And then I am going to do this shadow layer. So I've inked up the shadow layer in Wild Honey. I don't want to go dark like I did with the last flower, so I'm using the same color. We're doing a tone on tone, but I stamp it a couple times. For the leaves, I'm not going to show the leaves because it's super easy to line them up, but I did, for the base layer, Shabby Shutters, and then I came in with Altenew Evergreen Dye Ink, and then I topped it off with Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide. So now for the drawing. So when you're drawing your detail on these, and I'm just using a Polychromos pencil, it's a brown, I want to say it's like walnut brown. When you're drawing these, look at your photo as a reference. So I'm leaving space in between these little loops that I'm doing because they're smaller loops that come in between those in the photo. And then I'm just going to add some greater depth by darkening up some of the lines. So this is the bottom petal right now that I'm doing. So again, I'm adding some shading through there. And it's really important that these loops that you're going to draw follow the contour of the petal. So you don't want to go in and put a straight loop. You want to curve it like I did right there. So I'm curving it into the same shape of the petal. And again, I'll go back in and add some of those loops. When I do the loops on the top, I'm going to use a lighter hand, a lighter stroke, and I'm going to not have complete lines. I'm going to skip some areas. While I'll do this, I'm going to pop on some music so that you can watch it. If you want to skip ahead, that's totally okay too. I'll meet you back closer to the end so that we can put the card together. Alright, I'm just finishing up darkening up the centers, and definitely whenever you use your color pencils, make sure you have a really sharp point. So here you can see the motion wobblers that I have on there, and I just bent up the flowers to add a little bit more dimension. I used a stencil and blended on some antique linen for some wallpaper. I added a table there. I used Altenew versatile vases for the little vase that they're in. I really struggle with brown and oranges, so I switched that bottom piece to a purple because it was like way too much orange. Here I'm just showing you I used a little black soot distress oxide just to add a bit of a shadow, and I've used some letter dyes to add my sentiment. And here's the final card. I didn't think about it until after my photos, but I could have used like a tiny word sub-sentiment underneath the L just for a little more oomph in that corner over there, but I like the overall outcome, and I was really pleased with the hand-drawn accents on these particular flowers. The vase is just out of a wood grain pattern paper. I hope you enjoyed my take on layer stamping, and if you did, that you'll consider subscribing down below and hitting that like button. Definitely continue on the hop. Mona is next on our hop today, and I'll have a link to her down below, as well as a link to Justine's Technique Resource Binder class. If you haven't checked this out, it's such a cool idea. You collect all of the card making techniques in one place so that when you hit a snag or if you lose your mojo, you've got a place to go and a place to look to kind of get your creative juices flowing again. So be sure to check that out. I'd like to thank Justine today for the opportunity to participate in her hop, and huge thanks to you guys for joining me today. Thank you so much, and until next time, breathe, ink, inspire.